The winter wind howling across the Charles River carried a bitter, unrelenting chill that seemed to seep directly through the brickwork of our historic Boston brownstone. For 3 long, agonizing years, my husband Marcus and I had converted our beautiful home into a quiet sanctuary of hope, navigating the exhausting emotional labyrinth of fertility treatments and quiet disappointments. When the laboratory results finally confirmed that I was pregnant, the sheer, overwhelming wave of joy that washed over us felt like the arrival of a long-awaited spring. Marcus had wept tears of pure, breathless gratitude against my neck, vowing that he would dedicate every single second of his existence to ensuring the safety and absolute comfort of our developing child. In the initial weeks of the pregnancy, his devotion was nothing short of hyper-attentive, a display of marital perfection that earned the constant admiration of our neighbors and close friends. He completely took over the running of the household, insisting that my only responsibility was to rest, heal, and allow our miracle to grow within the peaceful confines of our home. Marcus took absolute command of the kitchen, meticulously preparing every meal from scratch, researching organic prenatal nutrition, and bringing me specialized herbal teas to soothe my early morning nausea. But as the calendar crept toward the 16th week of my pregnancy, the warm, celebratory atmosphere of our home began to darken into a terrifying, unexplained physical nightmare. It started insidiously, a faint, persistent metallic taste that lingered at the back of my throat no matter how many times I brushed my teeth or drank fresh water. Within days, the mild morning sickness I had anticipated transformed into a brutal, agonizing physical erosion that left me completely bedridden and trembling with weakness. I experienced violent, burning stomach cramps that tore through my midsection like a physical blade, accompanied by a sudden, terrifying numbness that began to creep into my fingertips and toes. My skin became unusually pale, decorated with strange, microscopic dark patches across my neck, and my hair began to break away in patches whenever I brushed it. I would lay under the heavy velvet blankets of our master suite, my body shivering with unprovoked chills while my mind raced in a fog of absolute, suffocating confusion. Whenever I begged Marcus to drive me to the emergency room, he would sit on the edge of the mattress, gently stroking my hair with a warm, comforting smile that radiated total reassurance. "It's just a hyperemesis gravidarum, darling, a rare but completely natural reaction to the massive surge of pregnancy hormones," Marcus would whisper, his voice smooth and entirely calm. "Your body is simply working overtime to protect the baby, and the doctors at the hospital will only pump you full of invasive, synthetic drugs that could harm her development. Drink your herbal tea, let the ginger settle your stomach, and trust me to look after you. I have consulted the top medical journals, and this phase will pass within a few weeks." Because I loved him, and because his logical, protective demeanor had always been my anchor, I swallowed my rising panic and drank the specialized brews he brought to my bedside every single evening. But beneath the surface of my compliance, an ancient, primitive survival instinct was quietly awakening within the deeper layers of my mind. I began to notice a chilling correlation that my fogged intellect couldn't immediately process. The burning stomach cramps and the violent tremors would peak exactly 2 hours after consuming the home-cooked meals Marcus prepared with such devotion. The true, horrifying reality of my domestic sanctuary, however, was about to be laid bare during a routine medical appointment that Marcus was mysteriously unable to attend. The morning of my 20-week anatomy scan arrived with a gloomy, rain-slicked sky that cast long, depressing shadows across the streets of Boston. Marcus had apologized profusely before leaving the house at dawn, claiming that an emergency corporate litigation crisis at his private investment firm required his immediate, physical presence. I drove myself to the prestigious Boston Maternal-Fetal Medicine Clinic, my hands shaking violently against the steering wheel as the numbness in my fingers made it difficult to grip the leather. I sat in the quiet, dimly lit ultrasound room, the steady hum of the medical equipment the only sound cutting through the heavy tension of my isolation. Dr. Sarah Brennan, a highly respected maternal-fetal specialist with a secondary background in clinical toxicology and forensic medicine, offered a warm, reassuring smile as she applied the warm gel to my swollen abdomen. She began to move the transducer across my skin, her eyes fixed on the massive high-definition monitors displaying the intricate, grayscale image of my developing baby daughter. For the first 10 minutes, the atmosphere in the room was peaceful, with Dr. Brennan pointing out the perfect formation of the baby's heart chambers, her tiny limbs, and the delicate profile of her face. But as the specialist moved the probe toward the placental interface, the gentle, relaxed demeanor of her face instantly froze, her eyes widening with a sudden, sharp intensity. She stopped speaking mid-sentence, her jaw tightly clenching as she zoomed in on the specific calcification patterns and structural anomalies forming along the uterine wall. Dr. Brennan adjusted the filtering settings on the screen, her breathing becoming shallow and calculated as she stared at the forensic evidence displaying itself directly on the ultrasound monitor. She didn't see a standard pregnancy complication. Her unique training allowed her to recognize a highly specific, destructive cellular pattern that had no business existing in a healthy maternal ecosystem. The placenta was heavily damaged, showing severe vascular constriction, unusual asymmetric microinfarctions, and a dense, unique mineralization layer that indicated the active presence of a highly destructive, foreign inorganic toxin. Furthermore, the fetal Doppler readings indicated an elevated, irregular arterial resistance, a clear, unmistakable sign that the baby's system was actively fighting against a systemic chemical assault. Dr. Brennan calmly set the transducer down, turned off the display monitors, and turned her chair to face me, the warm, maternal smile completely replaced by an ironclad, clinical seriousness. "Catherine, who prepares the food and drinks in your household?" Dr. Brennan asked, her voice deadly quiet, dropping an octave as she locked her eyes onto my pale face. "My husband, Marcus, does everything," I stammered, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs with a sudden, suffocating terror. "He's been making me special teas to help with my severe morning sickness." "Why? Is something wrong with my baby?" "Your baby is currently stable, but you are not suffering from morning sickness, Catherine," Dr. Brennan said, leaning forward and placing her steady hands over my trembling fingers. "The vascular destruction in your placenta and the specific neurological symptoms you described are the textbook, undeniable manifestations of chronic, systemic inorganic arsenic poisoning. Someone is actively introducing heavy metal toxins into your system in small, calculated doses, and if we do not isolate you immediately, your organs will fail, and you will lose this child within weeks." The word arsenic hung in the clinical air of the office like a heavy, suffocating poison, shattering the final remnants of my domestic reality into a million jagged pieces. A wave of pure, white-hot clarity washed over my mind, burning away the psychological fog and gaslighting that Marcus had used to keep me compliant for months. He wasn't protecting my health. He was systematically executing my destruction from the comfort of our own kitchen, using my long-awaited pregnancy as a shield to hide his crime. I didn't break down into hysterical tears, and I didn't reach for my phone to unleash an emotional confrontation that would give Marcus an opportunity to destroy the evidence or flee. Instead, a freezing, tactical calm descended upon my soul, the protective instincts of a mother taking complete monopoly over my actions. With the direct assistance of Dr. Brennan, who immediately coordinated with a private forensic laboratory to secure emergency blood and tissue samples, I initiated a sharp, silent flight. I left the clinic through a rear service exit, leaving my vehicle in the hospital parking garage to prevent any automated license plate readers or GPS trackers from charting my movements. I traveled by a traditional cash fare taxi directly to my sister's secluded apartment on the outer edges of the city, a private sanctuary that Marcus had never once visited during our marriage. The moment I stepped through her door, I went completely off the digital grid. I turned off my primary smartphone, removed the tracking chips, and activated a secure, untraceable burner device. While my sister wrapped me in warm blankets and prepared clean, untainted food, I used her secure, encrypted network terminals to launch a ruthless, digital investigation into my husband's life. Marcus assumed that because I was a traditional creative designer, I was completely ignorant of the complex cloud architectures and automated backup systems he used for his investment firm. He forgot that when we established our shared home office 3 years ago, he had mirrored his personal administrative vaults to our secondary family cloud server to ensure structural redundancy. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a mechanical precision, bypassing his outdated security credentials and accessing the deepest, hidden subdirectories of his digital life. As the encrypted folders fully decrypted on the screen before my eyes, the full, sickening scope of his marital betrayal laid itself bare with absolute, undeniable mathematical certainty. I uncovered a hidden, highly secure communication log detailing a passionate, 2-year affair with Vanessa, a senior corporate assistant at his private investment firm. The digital transcripts were an exercise in pure, unadulterated depravity, with Marcus and Vanessa openly discussing the agonizing details of my failing health with an unyielding arrogance. "She looked completely drained tonight, Vanessa," one of Marcus's messages read, the text time-stamped just 2 weeks prior. "The physical degradation is progressing exactly according to the chemical timeline. The doctors will easily dismiss the eventual cardiac arrest as a tragic, unpreventable complication of her high-risk pregnancy, and nobody will ever question the natural sorrow of a grieving widower." But the true, burning motive behind his domestic execution plot was revealed in the secondary folder containing his recent financial filings. Marcus had recently suffered catastrophic, multi-million-dollar losses in a series of unauthorized, high-risk offshore speculative investments, leaving his firm on the absolute brink of federal bankruptcy. To save himself from total ruin and fund a new, luxurious existence with Vanessa, he had quietly executed a massive, $3 million life insurance policy on my life. The legal documents contained a digital forgery of my signature, executed with a specialized tracing suite, listing Marcus as the sole, unilateral beneficiary of the entire payout in the event of my death. He had calculated the exact dosage of the inorganic arsenic, purchasing the odorless, tasteless toxin from an illegal commercial supplier through the dark web using corporate cryptocurrency accounts. He was systematically murdering his pregnant wife and his unborn child to clear his corporate debts and buy a condo in the sun with his mistress, fully confident that my complete trust would make me his perfect victim. I stared at the glowing monitor for a long time, the cold light reflecting in my eyes as a profound, permanent peace settled over my chest, completely replacing the grief with an unbreakable resolve. He believed he had executed the perfect, invisible crime, but he had left an absolute avalanche of digital and physical evidence behind him, and I was going to ensure that he paid the full, unyielding bill for his choices. The transition from a silent, tactical flight to an explosive criminal prosecution commenced 48 hours later with the sudden, definitive intervention of state law enforcement. Armed with the comprehensive forensic toxicology reports from Dr. Brennan and the decrypted cloud files I handed over, state troopers executed a high-priority arrest warrant on Marcus. They intercepted him inside our historic brownstone just as he was preparing to dump the remaining containers of contaminated spices and specialized tea leaves down the kitchen disposal. The dramatic criminal trial that unfolded in the heart of the Boston courthouse over the subsequent months became a spectacular display of pure human karma and legal justice. The courtroom was packed to the absolute ceilings with local journalists, high society colleagues, and extended family members who watched the pristine facade of the perfect husband be violently torn to pieces. The prosecution's case was an airtight, flawless masterpiece of forensic science and digital compliance architecture, leaving absolutely no room for legal maneuver or reasonable doubt. Dr. Sarah Brennan took the witness stand, her voice echoing through the silent, reverent room with an immense, clinical authority as she displayed the ultrasound images on the massive digital monitors. She pointed out the vascular calcifications and the exact physical manifestations of the heavy metal assault, explaining to the jury how the inorganic toxin had systematically degraded my bodily systems. Following her testimony, the state forensic teams presented the physical evidence seized from our kitchen, the industrial spice jars and organic tea bags that were heavily contaminated with pure arsenic crystals. But the ultimate, devastating climax of the trial arrived when the prosecution read the unedited digital transcripts of Marcus and Vanessa's cloud communications out loud to the courtroom. The raw, greedy timeline of their conspiracy filled the room with a heavy, suffocating disgust, causing several members of the jury to openly look at Marcus with expressions of pure, unadulterated loathing. Marcus sat at the defense table, his face a grotesque mask of pale ash, his unyielding arrogance completely evaporating as he realized that the quiet wife he had gaslit for months had completely outmaneuvered him. The judge looked down from his high bench, his expression carrying a freezing severity as he delivered a blistering lecture on the pure, unspeakable depravity of a man who would poison his pregnant wife for currency. I sentence you, Marcus Hayes, to a consecutive term of 30 years in a maximum security state facility, without the absolute possibility of early parole or structural mitigation, the judge roared, slamming his wooden gavel down with a definitive thunderclap. You will spend the remainder of your natural youth sitting in a concrete cell, reflecting on the absolute magnitude of the life you attempted to destroy for the sake of your own greed. As the bailiff stepped forward to lock the heavy steel handcuffs over his wrists and lead him away to the transport vehicles, Marcus turned his head to look at me one final time. His eyes were wide with a frantic, pathetic desperation, but I didn't offer him a single flicker of emotion, my face remaining entirely serene as I watched him disappear through the heavy security doors into the shadows. The legal victory in the courtroom was absolute, but my soul required one final, freezing layer of psychological satisfaction before I could fully close the book on the past. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I coordinated with my private security team and walked directly into the high-end corporate investment firm downtown where Vanessa was still attempting to maintain her professional employment. She was sitting at her sleek, minimalist desk, typing furiously on her computer, fully confident that her lack of a formal criminal indictment meant she had successfully escaped the fallout of the conspiracy. The heavy, rhythmic click of my heels against the polished marble floor caused her to instantly freeze, her head snapping up as I stepped into the center of her glass-walled office. I wore a tailored, elegant executive blazer that beautifully framed my advanced pregnancy, my posture entirely upright, relaxed, and fully empowered by the justice I had secured. Vanessa's face instantly turned a terrifying shade of pale white, her fingers trembling violently against her keyboard as she looked at the woman she had happily plotted to replace. What are you doing here, Catherine?" Vanessa stammered, her voice dropping into a weak, pathetic whisper as she looked around at her whispering colleagues. "You can't just walk into my private workspace." I didn't offer her a loud, dramatic scene, and I didn't raise my voice to complain about the betrayal. Instead, I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a heavy, transparent folder. Inside the folder lay a complete copy of the federal toxicology reports, the certified court transcripts detailing her intimate involvement in the murder plot, and a copy of the formal civil asset forfeiture lawsuits my lawyers had just filed against her personal bank accounts. I slid the folder quietly across the polished desk, coming to a dead stop directly in front of her manicured hands. "I am just here to deliver your copy of the clinical evidence, Vanessa," I said, my voice smooth, quiet, and carrying a chilling level of peaceful serenity that made her entire body shake. "The state prosecutor may have granted you immunity from the primary criminal trial, but my civil attorneys have officially frozen your corporate assets and your property accounts to satisfy the restitution judgments for the damage done to my health. Every single person in this building now knows exactly what kind of monster is sitting behind this desk, and your career in this city is officially dead. I suggest you take a very close look at the forensic data, because it is the exact blueprint of how you and Marcus completely lost the future you tried to steal from my child." Vanessa stared down at the folders, her jaw trembling violently as a look of pure, unadulterated terror washed over her features, her arrogant high society mask completely shattering into pieces. She didn't attempt to offer a frantic defense. She violently grabbed her designer purse, stood up from her desk, and fled out of the corporate building into the rainy afternoon, leaving her career and her dignity behind in the dirt. I watched her run away through the glass doors, a soft, calm smile spreading across my lips as the final remnants of the past's negativity dissolved completely from my heart. The final closure of my journey arrived 4 months later in the warm, sun-filled master bedroom of our historic Boston brownstone. The house no longer carried the heavy, suffocating scent of industrial gaslighting or hidden poisons. The rooms were filled with the sweet fragrance of fresh lavender, bright light, and beautiful new life. The court system had executed total asset transfers, granting me unilateral, absolute ownership of the entire multi-million-dollar estate, the historic properties, and the investment accounts that Marcus had tried to protect through murder. I sat in a comfortable rocking chair by the massive industrial windows, holding my perfect, beautiful baby daughter safely wrapped in a white velvet blanket against my chest. I had named her Sarah, an eternal, living testament to the brilliant doctor whose forensic intellect and sharp observation had saved our lives from the brink of destruction. Sarah opened her eyes, her small fingers gently reaching up to trace the fabric of my dress, her face a manifestation of pure, uncorrupted innocence and perfect health. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, a peaceful, comforting sound that marked the beginning of a magnificent, independent lineage built entirely on integrity, strength, and self-worth. I looked out over the quiet, tree-lined streets of Boston as the afternoon sun painted the sky in vibrant shades of gold and deep violet, my heart completely filled with an unshakable sense of total liberation. People always say that home is where your family is, a beautiful, comforting sentiment that you see printed on commercial decorations and sentimental greeting cards. But as I stand in my quiet, protected sanctuary, watching my perfect daughter sleep peacefully in my arms, I have learned a much deeper, permanent truth. Home isn't a geographic location defined by a marriage contract, a shared last name, or the toxic obligation to endure abuse in the name of a false loyalty. Home is where your boundaries are treated as sacred, where your sacrifices are genuinely honored, where the lives of children are fiercely protected, and above all else, home is where you are respected.